Hey, it's Stephen, your hardship real estate pro here again on the YouTube channel. I have another guest here today. And as you folks know, I really am not great at the whole introduction thing. You've probably heard that a million times by now. And I think it's always best if the guests introduce themselves. That way they say everything that's relevant and I don't sit here and make some big boo boo mistake. So if you'd go ahead and introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm Shannon Johnson with Academy Mortgage. I am a lender here in Utah State, and I'm licensed in Utah, Idaho, Washington, and Arizona.
Look at that. I've thought about doing my real estate license in Tennessee because it's where I grew up and I've lived in Utah for 11 years. Is that really hard to do? I'm curious.
No, you just need to know the different guidelines and state laws and all that stuff in each state. The federal guidelines are all the same. It's all the same test. You just have to do the individual state testing. So
Gotcha. Before we started the call, we were just chatting a little bit. And I think you said something that was really perfect that no one else has said on this channel, where it was talking about the house within a divorce is a long game
yeah.
for divorcing partners. Maybe you could talk about that for a little bit and explain what do you mean by
Yeah. So when somebody is just beginning the divorce process, ideally, if you're wanting to keep the house, and really even if you're planning on being the one that moves out of the house, ideally you will align yourself with a lender who has experience in divorce and a realtor who also has experience in divorce. And if your realtor and your lender can work with your divorce attorney, then the three of us can really run the numbers and make sure that you're getting a fair and equitable divorce settlement. If you are the one that is planning on staying in the house, we need to make sure that you can afford to stay in the house and look at all of the debts. And does something need to be paid off? Does the house maybe need to be sold? And that's where the realtor then comes in and says, I value this house at X amount. We can sell it for this amount. What does that look like? It's a conversation. It's a long game. We need to really take a deep breath and look at things and make sure that we have all the information before we move forward with any decisions.
one of the things you said, and it's probably one of the sticking points on my YouTube channel. So I'm probably preaching as a choir at this point. In my business, of course, I have these three niches where I'm doing the mobile homes without land, the senior transition housing, which is basically downsizing and moving mom into assisted living and such, selling her house. And
Yeah.
then there's the divorce real estate. And I don't know your story. You might share a little bit, but part of the reason I got into those niches is they came from what I call a general real estate transaction. And I learned through those transactions that there was so much complexity and nuance that I really had to go out of my way to learn stuff that was not readily available. My brokers at the time did not know. I was at a couple big companies too. For me at the time, I couldn't find anyone else doing it. Now there's two other realtors in the state that are doing it. There's one who's really prominent and then I would consider myself in there with them, but there's 18,000 realtors and there's only 3. It's the same with lenders. I
Yeah.
think there's probably 6 or 7, but then there's only a couple of you that are actually actively doing it. What I tell people all the time is with these sorts of transactions, and just again, to really talk about divorce, it's not just about the experience just for experience sake. These are very complicated in terms of the finances, the emotions, and the legalities. And a mistake really can cost you. And I don't mean just, oh, you're gonna lose $5,000, you lost your earnest money. I don't mean that. We're
No.
talking maybe years of financial hurt because you ended up getting foreclosed on.
Yeah.
Or there ends up, like in my case, we have to follow the divorce decree and we have to make sure there's no restraining orders on one partner. Somehow you bring that other person back into it and there was abuse, there's real repercussions for that. That's not common at all in other general real estate transactions. So for me, I got into these areas because I was so frustrated that no one else was doing it. And there's a huge need because a
Yeah.
lot of times the client doesn't even know. And then they end up hiring Mr. Random real estate agent or lender who only does 2 or 3 transactions a year. And it's a little frustrating because they make a lot of mistakes for the client.
Yeah, for sure. And two, another important person that should be a part of the conversation is a good title company, a good title agent that is going to do that research on the title to the home. A lot of times people just the way the marriages are set up, there's one person that pays the bills and there's one person that handles something else. And if the person that handles the bills isn't exactly forthcoming with everything, I've been involved in situations where I, as the lender, had to tell the husband, "Hey, so there's a line of credit in here, and now that it's an additional $100,000 that we have to pay off." And that can really throw a wrench in things. If the title company doesn't do their due diligence and let us know about all the liens that are showing up on title, that can really hurt things. So I actually got started in doing divorce mortgages for personal reasons. I've been divorced a couple of times. And, I've been in the mortgage industry in various capacities for 25 years. When I was going through my divorces, I was just very emotional about it. And I just washed my hands of it and get me out. And then in looking back now, I'm like, I really, I really hurt myself by not just taking that deep breath or deferring to someone else and saying, yeah, we own these properties. I don't know what to do. Can you help me? And that's what I'm here for. That's what you're here for. We're the unemotional third parties that can help guide this couple as they go through the divorce. But like you said, there's restraining orders potentially that need to be taken into consideration. There's all kinds of little nuances that we really need to be aware of.
And I'll tell you, the house is something, especially with the mortgage and the deed, that has to be resolved while you're in the divorce. It's funny. Right before we started talking on Zoom today, I did another interview with a marriage therapist, relationship marriage therapist. And in between my Zoom call with him and yours, I was on Facebook scrolling. And in one of the local Ogden groups, I'll say the city, guy posted stuff about how he wants to get married to his girlfriend, but he got divorced a couple years ago. And then he's on the house still with the ex-wife. And the ex-wife and wants to buy an out. And it's like all this mess. And the thing is, now he needs the money he start this new life. And that's like a failure of education. It's a failure of coaching on their emotions, but it's also a failure on the attorneys. And I think some people, and I'm not trying to diss attorneys when I say this, but it's not the attorney's job to really figure out the real estate. That's my job. That's your job.
Yeah.
And I say it's also the client's responsibility to care about that. And the attorney is there to get y'all to come to some sort of amicable agreement without, hopefully, without it going to full on litigation.
Yeah. When someone is thinking of getting a divorce, they should really be interviewing multiple divorce attorneys. And that's one of the questions I think they should ask is, do you have experience with properties? And not just deciding who gets it and who doesn't, but really looking at who can afford it and who can't. I have some neighbors down the street that are getting a divorce, and the divorce attorney never once asked anything about it. Of course, as neighbors, I'm not super close with them. I don't really know them that well, but I went to them and just was like, "Hey, have you guys even talked about this? Have you run the numbers? Can you afford to stay in this house? Can he afford to move out? And does it accomplish everything that you guys need?" And I started going over my checklist, and they were like, "No, our attorney never said anything about that. He just said I got the house." We ran the numbers, and it turns out she can't afford to keep the house. And so now we're looking at a completely different situation, and they're ending up having to sell the house to accomplish everything that is needed within that divorce decree. That's what a divorce attorney really should be looking at as well and saying, you know what? I don't know all the answers. Let's find a realtor and find a lender and find a title company that we can work with where we can all just be a team and sit down and figure it out together.
It's funny because you talked about the divorce decree, right? And I think it's important not only to follow that, but it's so important to be a neutral third party.
Yes.
For me, I tell people, hey, I know things are hard, but details are not relevant because I'm here to get you the most money out of the house and to follow the court order. Say that's it. And we really pride ourselves on structuring processes to be neutral, nonpartisan. I mean, we go out of our way to even keep track of, oh, last time we spoke to this party first. The next time we're going to talk to the other party first. Because we don't want anyone thinking we're taking any sort of favoritism.
Yeah.
Because in
You have
the
to be
end,
very unemotional about it.
because it's so emotional. Honestly, people getting divorced need someone who is, I would say, very business in order to help them. That's
Yeah.
just, hey, these are the facts. This is what we're going to do to resolve these things financially. Because you bringing in an emotional element, that doesn't help anybody.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned the title search, and I kinda wanna talk about that. I did a divorce, back in, late spring, and, of course, every time I do any sort of listing, unless it's a mobile home without land, that's different, but if there's real estate, we always will pull a preliminary report. It's just the relationship I have with my title rep, and honestly, a title company should be willing to do that for multiple reasons, and yeah, this one, we looked and no joke, it had 3 judgments, where people had taken them to court, and it went back to 2002.
Well, and there can be liens on there too that people don't even think about. People can put liens against your home for not paying the landscaper, or there could be a tax lien. It could be that's called a mechanic's lien, where, maybe you didn't pay the guy that delivered the load of gravel 3 years ago. Stuff like that. It's gotta be paid when we're trying to work through the divorce, because that would be considered marital debt. You have to have that relationship with the title company that can pull that and say, here's what we're looking at. You've got these 3 things or these 5 things. And sometimes not everybody knows about what's showing up on there.
Sometimes I'll talk to people, and one of the reasons for staying in the house is, "What am I gonna buy after this? Anything I buy is gonna be smaller because I won't have as much money, and I just can't be in a smaller house," and there's all those concerns and worries, and I can understand it because they're used to a lifestyle. The unfortunate thing about divorce, from what I see, is it will ruin things financially. You do take a step back financially. But what I would always tell people is, yeah, it's really scary. But I think committing to a plan moving forward will give you courage, because what I would rather see, if they truly can't afford the house, which happens more often than people think, that they can't stay in the house because they can't afford it. I would rather them sell and then rent for 6 to 12 months and then buy something, or buy like a condo or townhome, than run the risk of sitting in that home and it going into foreclosure. You're a lender. Maybe you could talk to me about, people have heard the word foreclosure since 2008. What does that even mean? What does that mean for someone? Why would they even want to avoid that when they've already got too many big issues? I don't care. Why would they want to avoid?
The main reason to avoid the foreclosure is because it completely annihilates your credit. And you've got to wait several years after a foreclosure to even be able to buy a house again. Having gone through a divorce, I understand that pain of having to take a step back and go into a smaller home and downsizing your life essentially. But I couldn't have afforded the house that I was in when I was previously married. And in order to move forward and move on with your life, sometimes you do have to downsize and take those baby steps, whether that means renting for a year or buying a condo or a townhouse or something like that. Because a foreclosure will ruin your credit, not just for buying a house, but getting a store credit card or buying a car. 9 times out of 10, money gets tight after a divorce because your lifestyle has just changed. And I had a client one time that she had resigned herself to the fact that she was going to be downsizing and she was moving into a twin home, sort of like a townhouse, but an attached home. She's moving into this twin home and she needed new tires. She ran over something on the freeway and it destroyed 2 of her tires, and she didn't have the money for it, so she had to finance it. Well, in the whole process of everything, her ex-husband had not made the payments on the house that had just sold, and her credit had taken a huge hit. She ended up having to get a credit card for this tire shop with a 25% interest rate and paid a ridiculous amount for these tires. And that's not even a foreclosure. Your credit score can go from 700 to 500 or lower overnight. Once that foreclosure process has started, and it takes years to get your credit back in check.
I want to maybe touch on just like the stress and overwhelm those kinds of money problems. Like
Yeah.
you're talking about, you're going to have money problems after the divorce. I think part of our goal as professionals is to help people avoid that if at all possible. I know a lot of people want to stay in the home for kids, right? And I think that's very admirable. Makes a lot of sense. If they can stay in the home for the kids, that's great. But I think going through a foreclosure or tough financial situations with kids, I think that could add way more stress to a kid than just selling the house and moving to a new place.
Yeah.
Just because I've seen it. I never was poor or anything as a kid, but growing up, there were times where I didn't make rent. My life has changed a lot. And I would never want to put my kids through that.
And I think kids pick up on a whole lot more than we give them credit for. Kids can tell when mom and dad aren't happy and when there's stress in the marriage and that kind of thing. They can sense all of that. And once the divorce is done, they can sense if there's troubles with money or that kind of thing. And like you said, our job as the professionals is to make sure that you're in the best possible situation that we can get you into. And whether that's renting and building up your credit or your savings or whatever, or buying something smaller, maybe you can move back into the neighborhood is your ideal or back into the school district. Maybe you can get some kind of a waiver through the school district to be able to keep your kids at the same school. There's lots of different ways to accomplish the same goal. And if your kids changing schools is a concern, let's talk about that. I'm not a life counselor. I don't know how to do all the things, but I am happy to do some research and see if I can't get you in touch with someone at the district to help alleviate those worries. And it's a matter of a conversation, really.
Yeah, and I'm thinking back to the beginning of our conversation. You talked about the long game. This is obviously very involved in someone's life, and I would say more on your side. You might be working with someone a couple of years after the divorce to help them finally buy a new home because maybe they were forced to rent or they're going to upsize. And I would say that's the same for me. This isn't just some we talk to you for a couple of weeks and you're gone forever. It's just
Yeah,
we're gonna end up being a part of your life for a couple of years because me personally and professionally, I take pride in seeing people make that successful transition,
yeah.
and I want to help them do that.
This industry, the real estate industry, regardless of which side of the table you're on, it's about the people, right? It's about getting people into homes. And sometimes that's a baby step process where we're eventually going to get into that ideal dream house. And sometimes it's years long before we can even take that first step. But I find that my clients are grateful that they know they can reach out to me anytime and I'm always going to be there. This is what I do. And if they want to run scenarios and they want me to check their credit, or if they just want me to talk them off a ledge, that's what I'm here for. That's my job. And at the end of the day, they're going to be happy and they're going to be in a much better situation. If you're getting a divorce, you're already in a low spot. We will get you into a better situation. It might not be immediate, but eventually, like you said, the long game, we will get you there. We just might need a little bit of time to do it.
Yeah, and you talked about people reaching out to you. Of course, we're gonna have your contact information, website, and all that in the description box below, but it does help the video and, of course, the Google Guides if you could just tell everyone how to contact you.
Yeah. If you go to www.academymortgage.com/Shannon Johnson, that's got all of my information on there. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram and a little bit on TikTok. We're working on that one still.
I feel the same way. I'm like here and there with TikTok. It's a different animal. Thanks so much for coming on the YouTube video,
My
and
pleasure.
we'll see you next time. Okay.
Great. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.